What's up, movie nerds and basketball geeks? Welcome back to MovieBall. When do you guys think I'll get ads on my videos? Wouldn't that be great? Making money doing something I enjoy? On today's episode, I'm reviewing one of my most anticipated movies of the year, It Chapter 2. Does Pennywise and the Losers Club's second outing live up to the hype? Let's find out. No. I'm just joking. I just wanted to have another punchline there at the end. But seriously, it didn't exactly live up to the hype. So, what is the general synopsis of the second It chapter? Well, 27 years later, It has returned, and the Losers Club must band together to save Derry and defeat Pennywise once and for all. Looking back to the 2017 predecessor, I was immediately enamored with it. Bill Skarsgård gave us an instantly iconic performance in Pennywise the Clown, and it was just a funny, touching, and overall thoroughly entertaining coming-of-age story. Did I find the movie scary? Not really in the slightest. There were a couple of moments of creepiness due to Skarsgård's excellent portrayal of the titular character, but from an actual horror standpoint, there wasn't really anything to keep you up at night, at least personally. Also, I got a haircut. I said last video I needed to get a haircut, and I got a haircut, so I'm a man of my word. You can trust me. I'm not even going to use that. But that didn't take away from the movie for me. Sure, being terrifying in addition to being a greatly fun movie would have helped, but not being scary didn't diminish its quality for me. It's still a movie that I constantly, quote, rewatch and always find new things to like upon further viewings. So of course, almost instantaneously after watching the first It in theaters, I was insanely pumped for the follow-up. Not really knowing much about the source material other than the 1990 miniseries and watching videos on where Chapter 2 would take us, I wasn't really sure what I would be in for. Somehow, although being outrageously excited for this film, I was able to keep my expectations to a minimum, and I think that made this kind of mediocre sequel more enjoyable for me. Yeah, it's a pretty mediocre film, and it's quite odd because there is a lot to enjoy here, but let's just talk about something for a second. This movie is 3 hours long, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because if you can be a grand and breathless adventure for 180 minutes, sign me up. Avengers Endgame is a prime example of that just earlier this year. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which most people liked, but for me it failed to be quick-moving and engaging enough to sit through 3 hours without getting bored. So where does that leave It Chapter 2? Somewhere in the middle. Remember the synopsis I gave? The Losers Club returns 27 years later to face off against Pennywise one last time. Yeah, that doesn't exactly sound like it merits a 3-hour runtime, but the filmmakers found a way to stretch that plot to its limits. And I fully understand that Stephen King's novel is 5 billion pages long, rooted with deep mythology and world building at every corner, but as much as you might like a book, they're more or less expected to be read over a period of time rather than in just an afternoon sitting. And books aren't movies, so if you're adapting a book to another form of media, whatever you're adapting, it should be best adapted into the way that it best fits that form of media. Did I make that confusing? I don't know. Let's just get to the next part. Let's just kind of start from where this movie takes off and work our way through, because there is a lot to talk about and I don't want to miss anything, so let's just take it to the beginning. What the movie opens with really doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm considering doing a spoiler video as well, so if you like and comment telling me that you want one, then I'll make one. But there's just a lot to get into, and I don't really want to give the slightest bit away, so, like, comment, subscribe. However, with that opening, I was just trying to figure out exactly what it meant to the film and how it connected. Other than letting the audience know that Pennywise is back, it was just a very, very odd choice in how they went about it, so to speak. It was almost pointless at the end of the day. There is a sequence in this movie involving Pennywise that rivals the opening scene to the original. It almost felt like it was initially shot to be the introductory to this chapter, but instead it happens somewhere in the middle, and while I really liked that scene, and if you don't know what scene I'm talking about and you've seen the movie, I'll just say bleachers, but while I did dig that scene, it just wasn't the opening, and so that first 5 to 10 minutes, they just felt out of place. And I forgot about it as the movie went on because there is so much happening and it is so long, so it never really annoyed me throughout the film, but as it finally concluded, I thought back and went, yeah, no, that really makes no sense. Anyway, we are reintroduced to the Losers Club 27 years later as their adult counterparts in one of the best casting jobs ever put to film. And you're gonna see, and I'm sure already have heard everyone say that, but it really is inspirational casting. It is hands down the best part of the film. Now, I don't necessarily mean they got the best actors in the world to play these kids, and in some cases they did, but I just mean they did a phenomenal job in choosing actors that could embody the older versions of these kids. I think all of the main cast here is strong. There isn't a weakling or anyone that pulls the rest of the group down. However, I don't think there's anyone that really stands out or steals the show. And that might be a little head-turning to some, as in almost every review you read or watch, you see nothing but praise for Bill Hader's depiction of the adult Richie. And while I found him quite good and easily latching on to the spirit of this character, the way the script is written for him causes him to become an overbearing sense of comic relief. The film is set up for Bill Hader to steal the show and say funny things, but it just becomes way too redundant as there is an over-reliance on him quipping one-liners and yelling stuff. It got to a point where the jokes weren't even creative or funny and we were just supposed to laugh because it's Bill Hader and he's been doing this all movie. It just started to wear thin for me. But at the end of the day, he's still very good, and so is the rest of the cast. James McAvoy and Jessica Chastain are the A-listers of sorts, and they play the main characters, if you will, and they do a very good job. James Ransone is very admirable as the adult Eddie. Isaiah Mustafa does a very good job in making me believe he's the adult version of Mike. The film, it all works from that perspective. But when you realize there are so many storylines and side plots happening, it can be difficult to care about all of the characters and process everything that's going on. The film wants to shine a light on each individual character and kind of give them their moment to learn a lesson or realize something about themselves, but it can all just be very overwhelming. Again, this movie is practically 3 hours long and it feels very stretched out just to remain faithful to the source material. But there's a lot of things taken from the book that just don't really work here. Again, no spoilers, but the approach in which the history and origin of Pennywise is written is done in a very old-fashioned kind of method, and that makes sense. It was originally created in the 80s. But it's 2019, and it just feels like you can find a better way to modernize this legend of Pennywise. But at the end of the day, it's expected that this is going to be a gonzo adaptation. It is a bafflingly mad concept, and you've just got to roll with it the best that you can. And for the most part, I did. It's just that the movie can be quite uneven due to all of its aspirations and wildly ambitious nature. These are all of the storylines that It Chapter 2 is trying to balance. The return, past, and chemistry of the Losers Club, Pennywise as a character and a storyline, and an entire film devoted to learning about the folklore of Pennywise. It Chapter 1 worked because it had a clear identity as a coming-of-age story wrapped into a horror film. That movie completely ignored the actual origin and history of Pennywise. Where this movie falters is trying to jam all of that down our throats in a quick manner because it has so many other things that it's trying to do. It tries to explain things and they don't always make sense, then you begin to wonder about them and you think about how the characters might have even learned about this stuff themselves, but you just gotta roll with it, as I said, due to the wacky nature of this story. Perhaps the worst narrative that this movie tries to incorporate is a plotline that I found to be an incessantly stupid scenario. Without spoiling it, it involves the incident from when they were kids and a decision that the filmmakers choose to run with, and it just makes no sense to me. I mean, it's mystifying. And I understand that it was in the book, but I don't care! I can dive into it if I do a spoiler review, but I'll simplify it by saying that it has to do with what the town of Derry does to people when they move away, and I just found it to be a very dumb idea that adds 30 minutes to the movie. 30 minutes that you don't need. Maybe if the movie was 2.5 hours long, it would have felt like a more concise and structurally better film. Or at least in this case, they could have expanded on other things and other plot lines that they shorthanded, like the mythology, for example. Because you definitely feel the 3-hour runtime of this movie as it goes on, but I will say this. You're never bored. There's always something happening in some way that will keep your interest, even when you start to feel the runtime, and you do. The entire middle segment of this film is an hour of the same thing happening in different situations. It's a very repetitive portion of the film that manages to entertain you as well, but it becomes a noticeably tiresome ploy. I checked the time thinking the movie was almost over, and there was still an hour left. The movie drags mainly because of the circumstance in the middle of this film. Now, I didn't think the first It was scary, so I didn't really have any expectations for this one to frighten me in any way, and while it's more or less the same idea here, I do think this movie is a scarier film. Being almost 3 hours long, it has more opportunities to scare you, so maybe that helped. But don't get me wrong, this isn't terrifying or scary in the way that you'll be kept up at night and have a hard time sleeping, because it is a jump scare horror film that contains a few good jolts. And normally, I strongly detest jump scares. They're cheap, you can usually see them coming from a mile away, and it's just a lazy device to get your heart pumping for 15 seconds. But, and while they don't all work here, there are a few effective jump scares because they're crafted in a unique way. That's not to say I'm still scared once the jump scare is over, because I'm not, and that's the sometimes pointlessness in this method of horror. They don't stick with you because they're instantly over. But this movie manages to conjure up a pretty good amount of different jolts, and they do a good job of making you tense up getting ready for that next jump. Unfortunately, Pennywise himself almost takes a back seat to everything else that's going on. When it comes to the scares, it's always Pennywise behind the curtains pulling the strings, but it's not usually literally Pennywise the dancing clown. It's some other weird thing he's shapeshifted into to manifest the biggest fears of the losers. And while that can make for some fun moments and you don't want to risk the overuse of Pennywise therefore making him ineffective, they underuse Pennywise to unfortunate results. They do a lot of special effects and CGI work here, and sometimes it looks marvelous and other times it looks almost unusable, but that was kind of the same story with the first film. It's just that there's so much more here that it can kind of be cringy. And that also plays into the flashback and younger Loser Club moments in the movie. The kids got recognizably older, so apparently they had to digitally de-age some of them. Like, who are they, Samuel L. Jackson in a Marvel movie? And it can honestly be a distraction because you not only notice that they got older, but you also notice that there was some kind of weird look to them. So they look older and they look weird. And then there's also some like atrocious ADR work that is put into the film. And it can be very distracting. And I understand that some of it's not their fault, but it's just like... Other than that, the flashbacks of the young losers are great. They're often funny and charming, much like the original film. And they don't overuse the kids, but at times it's just like, alright, remember, we still have 17,000 other things happening. And with another non-spoiler, there's a person that makes an adult return that looks to be a pretty cool plotline that could feed into the story later, but it becomes 1000% utterly wasted. They just seem to throw these things in there to satisfy the source material, but it just makes to create for some more meaningless loose ends. Throughout most of the movie, there is a strong predictability to it, how some of the plot lines get wrapped up, how the other half of jump scares play out in a very obvious way, but that doesn't bother me nearly as much as the amount of cliches that are sprinkled throughout. And I'm literally strictly referring to one cliche that they kept going back to again and again. It's that cliche where someone goes, "Oh my god, we did it," or "Oh my god, everything's alright, it's all okay," and it's obviously not. "Oh my god, we did it, oh thank god that's over, we know you didn't do it and we know it's not over." It's just a very frustrating and obnoxious cliche that I never want to see again. And finally, this takes me to the ending. Was it all worth it? The final showdown and the reason we all came to see the movie. Did it pay off? There's some really cool things that happen in the finale of this film, and I feel like it seems that I've been shitting all over this movie for the entirety of this video, but there is a lot to like about this movie. Like I said, the casting is perfect. There are masterfully structured jump scares. When Pennywise is involved in a sequence, it is always really cool, and you are glued to the screen. Bill Skarsgård is once again excellent, and even if some jokes fall flat, there are a number of good laughs and comedic set pieces. However, the very most integral part of the climax to this movie was rather, It didn't really do it for me, and in hindsight, it was very stupid. It was disappointing, to say the least. But with all of that said, and all of the problems I had with this film, I still enjoyed myself. It Chapter 2 is an overlong follow-up that has trouble harmonizing all of its plotlines and desires, which ultimately winds up being a disappointing and bloated jumble. It wants to be this great epic with a larger-than-life climax, but it just confuses all of its ideas and whimpers into conclusion. Alas, I was able to distance myself from those issues and enjoy what was a big-budget horror film that had a lot of fun throughout. I'm going to give It Chapter 2 a 7 out of 10. So now that I've finished rambling on for 6 hours, comment below, let me know what you thought of the movie, let me know if you want me to do a spoiler review. I'm going to make one anyway, so comment. Thank you guys for watching. If you could please smash that like button. Pretend the like button's a baseball. And you're up at bat. You know, what did your coach tell you in 3rd grade? Pretend it's your sister's head. No. Pretend it's my like button. Pretend it's the like button to one of MovieBall's videos. Look, do you want to get to first base or do you want to hit a home run? You're going to hit a home run. You're going to hit a grand slam. It's out of here. Gotta go run the bases.